The silence of some people is more offensive than the cruelty of others. Ever seen someone cross a line so subtle it was nearly invisible, until they smiled doing it? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe to follow stories that honor courage in unexpected places. Bradley McAllister didn't walk like a broken man. He walked like someone who had already made peace with what had broken him, spine tall, shoulders squared, but each step holding the unspoken fatigue of 1,000 quiet sacrifices. He was 76, and though his body had softened over time, the steel in his eyes hadn't. It was the same steel that had stared through jungle heat and helicopter rotors in 1969, and later through a funeral detail as they handed him a folded American flag, crisp and merciless. That flag now lived in his wallet, not for display, but for connection, pressed tight in a custom ID card next to his VA card and driver's license, worn soft from years of touch. He didn't talk about his son, not unless someone asked, and even then only with a pause and a nod before saying, "Tommy served honorably." That was enough. Bradley never wanted to live off his grief, but he had earned the right to carry it. Today he needed to pull some cash, nothing fancy, just enough for groceries, the vet bill for the neighbor's injured cat he'd taken in, and a stop by the hardware store. He always used the same branch, Red Oak National on 8th and Donnelly, mostly because it was close and the parking lot was never full. What he didn't expect was a new face behind the glass. "Next," came the voice, young, sharp, and a little too loud. The woman wore a blazer 2 sizes too tight and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read Rachel Carrington, Client Experience Specialist, as if calling her a teller might offend her. Bradley stepped forward, removing his wallet with practiced ease. She looked him over, up, down, and back to her phone screen for a split-second check. He offered a polite nod. "Good morning, ma'am." Rachel's eyes didn't move. Transaction. "Just a withdrawal, please." He slid the ID card across. It was encased in protective plastic. The front side was his VA ID. The back, a photo of the folded flag with his son's name and rank beneath it. CPL. Thomas E. McAllister, KAI, Paktika Province. Rachel blinked at it. Then it came. A scoff. Short, nasal. "What is this? You expected this to be valid ID?" Bradley didn't flinch. "That's my VA card. Government issued. You can verify it against your system." Rachel rolled her eyes and tapped at her keyboard like she was punishing it. "Sure." "Let me guess. You're one of those guys who flashes war stuff to get, what, sympathy points?" Bradley's spine stiffened. "No, ma'am. Just trying to make a withdrawal from my own account." Behind him, someone in line chuckled. It was the kind of laugh that says, "I'm not brave enough to say it, but I agree with her." Rachel lifted the ID up to the light as if it might explode. "This isn't even... What is this, like a memorial card? Is this a new thing now? People walking around with flag IDs?" Another laugh. Bradley didn't turn. He just waited, because that's what the Army teaches you. You wait. You don't rise to every insult. You don't hand people the weapon they're trying to provoke you into giving them. Rachel handed the ID back like it was sticky. "You'll need to show a real ID, a driver's license, passport, not whatever this is." She flicked her fingers toward it like waving away a fly. He set his driver's license down silently. She processed the withdrawal like nothing had happened. But something had. The man behind him in line muttered under his breath, "Flag ID, Jesus Christ," followed by another small laugh, this time from a woman holding a phone up discreetly. Except it wasn't discreet enough, because Jasmine Rivera saw it all. She hadn't intended to film anything that day. She was there to close a savings account after switching banks, her own frustrations with Red Oak National already simmering. But the moment Rachel mocked that flag, and the look in Bradley McAllister's eyes didn't change not 1 inch, Jasmine knew what she was looking at. Not pity, not weakness, dignity. She started recording, quietly from the hip, capturing the posture, the composure, the injustice. Bradley gathered his cash and wallet slowly, tucking the flag ID carefully back into its slot, smoothing it as he always did, the same way he'd once smoothed Tommy's dress blues before the funeral. He turned and walked past the still sniggering couple without a word. Not a glance, not a breath wasted, but Jasmine followed. "Sir," she said gently once they were outside, holding her phone low. "I hope it's okay, but I recorded what happened in there. I think people need to see this." Bradley turned, his face unreadable. "That's up to you," he said after a long pause. "But I didn't do anything worth watching." Jasmine smiled. "That's why they need to see it." Bradley nodded, quiet. "Tommy's in that wallet, not just a photo. It's what's left of a life that should have been bigger than mine. That girl in there, she laughed at the last thing I have of him that doesn't hurt." Jasmine's hand trembled slightly on the phone. "I won't post your name," she said softly, "just the moment." Bradley nodded once more. "Then you do what you think's right." She did. 8 minutes later, the video had over 14,000 views. And inside Red Oak National, Rachel Carrington's monitor blinked once. Then again. Then blacked out, along with every screen in the branch, as a silent message rolled through the building system. "Branch closed for personnel review. All staff report to immediate training. Do not engage public." No one knew it yet, but a wave was coming. Bradley hadn't planned to be a symbol. He wasn't looking for attention, let alone justice. He'd only wanted to pick up a few things for the weekend and get home before his knees started complaining. But when he got back to his small house, tucked just outside the city limits, the door barely shut behind him before the phone started buzzing. He let it ring. He always did. Bradley didn't keep up with the modern world unless it came through his front door or the VA hospital. Social media? Not his thing. Internet? Only for checking the pharmacy hours and reading obituaries. But this wasn't something that could be ignored. He finally answered when Mel Carter called. Mel didn't believe in nonsense, and he certainly didn't believe in calling unless it mattered. "Can you see this yet?" Mel's voice rasped through the phone like gravel wrapped in warmth. "You're everywhere, brother." Bradley frowned. "What do you mean, everywhere?" "Hear a headline. That girl filmed it. The flag ID, the teller, the laughs. It's out there. Already hit 20,000 views before I finished my morning coffee. Twitter's chewing him up like jerky. You need to take a look." Bradley sighed and walked into the kitchen. "I didn't ask her to do that." "You didn't need to," Mel said. "That's the thing. The truth don't ask permission." He clicked the receiver down with a heaviness that settled over his shoulders. 20 minutes later, he stood at his laptop, eyes squinting at the glowing screen. It took a few tries to find the right website, and when he did, the first thing he saw was his own hands, gnarled, lined, but careful, sliding that folded flag ID across the bank counter. The video was grainy but steady. The teller's laugh rang out clearly. And the silence that followed? It was deafening. The comment section beneath the video was already flooding like a breached dam. "Who mocks a folded flag? This man deserves more than that teller's smirk. He deserves a monument. My brother died in Fallujah. That teller can rot. I don't know who he is, but I'd stand beside him in a heartbeat." Bradley shut the lid after 2 minutes. That was enough. Outside his window, the sun had dipped behind the sycamores, painting shadows across his lawn where an old wooden flagpole stood. Paint chipped, rope fraying, but the flag still lifted at half-mast. He walked outside and tightened the cord. When he turned around, he saw Jasmine standing just beyond the fence. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. "I figured you'd want to know," she said. "News outlets are picking it up. Someone just called it the flag ID moment." Bradley didn't say anything for a long time. Then he looked her square in the eye. "You did what you believed was right." "I did," Jasmine said, her voice steady, though her hands were clasped behind her back like a kid caught sneaking cookies. "But I didn't expect the firestorm. Some are calling for boycotts. Others want that teller's job. and someone leaked an internal bank memo. They've closed that branch for a compliance review. She pulled out her phone and held it up. They're asking for interviews. They want your name, your background. You don't have to say anything, sir, but they're listening. Bradley's eyes softened, then let them listen to silence for a while. He turned to go back inside, but Jasmine called out, not to stop him, but to ask something deeper. "What was your son like?" Bradley paused at the screen door. He hadn't spoken Tommy's name in public in years, not since the funeral. "Me like maps," he said after a moment. "Used to draw treasure routes in the backyard when he was 6. Said one day he'd find something no one else could. Turns out he found a landmine first." Jasmine blinked, stunned into quiet. Bradley gave her a small smile. "Now I carry the only thing that's left. That flag. It ain't just fabric. It's the last breath they folded up and handed to me." That night, while the world boiled with outrage, Bradley made himself a sandwich and sat in his recliner. He didn't watch the news. He tuned into the oldies station and let Johnny Cash do the talking. Meanwhile, inside the Red Oak National Headquarters 2 states away, panic brewed like a storm front. A boardroom full of gray suits sat huddled over laptops and tablets, watching the virality of the situation spiral beyond control. One of the execs, a woman named Lauren Trent, pulled up the analytics screen. 76,000 shares on Twitter. Local news is already at the teller's house. She's not answering the phone, and now... She clicked another window. Veteran advocacy groups are organizing protests outside every Red Oak branch. A bearded man at the end of the table snapped his laptop shut. "We've got to respond, now." Lauren leaned forward. "We already issued a statement." "No, we issued a shrug. We need a correction. A reversal, a reckoning." The CEO, a man named Nathan Harrow, spoke up for the first time. "Then do it." Within an hour, every Red Oak branch received the same directive: suspend in-person operations for 2 business days. All tellers, managers, and staff would undergo emergency training, not just on ID compliance, but on veteran recognition, empathy, and trauma awareness. It wasn't just PR, it was survival. And at the top of that training packet was a single, now famous image: Bradley McAllister's folded flag card, slightly bent at the corners, worn with love, and sharper than any weapon they'd ever faced. The next morning, as Bradley sipped his coffee on the porch, Mel showed up unannounced with 2 donuts, 1 newspaper, and a grin that stretched halfway across his weathered face. "You made page 1, Mel said, tossing the paper onto the table. Bradley sighed and picked it up. There, just below the fold, were 3 words in bold: "Dignity denied. Nation responds." Mel took a bite of his donut and mumbled through it, "Told you, storm coming, but looks like it's blowing the right direction." Bradley stared at the headline for a long time. He still wasn't sure how he felt about being a face for something he never wanted to spotlight. But when he looked at the flagpole swaying in the breeze and heard the neighbor's kid yelling as he ran past on his way to school, something settled deep in his chest. Not pride, not anger, as truth. Not everyone sees the value in silence. But sometimes silence is the loudest sound in the room. The following Monday, Bradley's front yard looked like a press conference. 3 reporters stood by the sidewalk. A college student with a camcorder hovered near the fence. One man even held a laminated press badge printed from what looked like a home printer. All of them were facing the porch with anticipation, waiting for a man who hadn't spoken publicly in decades. But Bradley McAllister wasn't interested in being a headline. He was in the kitchen, buttering toast. "I don't understand why they keep coming," he muttered to himself, sliding a plate onto the table. "I'm not a spectacle. I'm a man who wanted $40 and some peace." His phone buzzed again. He didn't bother checking. Mel had already warned him it would be like this, that viral stories weren't just flashes in the pan anymore. They were wildfires, and even the quietest people could be caught in the wind. Jasmine had tried to prepare him too. She'd texted him the night before. "Hey, just so you know, CNN clipped part of the video. They're running a segment tomorrow. I blurred your full name. But people want to hear from you. Bradley appreciated the respect, but what he really appreciated was silence. He stepped out onto the porch with a coffee mug in hand, ignored the flash of lenses, and gave them a small wave. Not of invitation, but dismissal. Not today, folks. And with that, he stepped back inside, closed the screen door gently, and left the world to its noise. But outside his house, the silence he gave them only deepened the hunger. Inside the Red Oak National Headquarters, the training sessions had started. Projectors buzzed, HR reps clicked through slides that were bland and too late. At one of the regional branches in Asheville, a teller named Ray Parker sat through the session with growing discomfort. He'd served 2 tours in Iraq before joining civilian life. He didn't talk about it much, just said he'd been over there when people asked. But when the training screen lit up with a photo of the folded flag card, Bradley's folded flag card, Ray sat up straighter. "Is that what this is all about?" he asked, raising a hand. "This card?" The facilitator nodded. "Yes, it was mocked inappropriately by a teller last week. It sparked public outrage." Ray leaned forward. "That's not just a card. That's sacred. That flag covered his son's coffin, didn't it?" There was a pause in the room. "I believe so," the facilitator replied, flipping to the next slide awkwardly. "We're now implementing a nationwide Veterans Respect Initiative. As part of that," Ray stood, not out of protest, just because he couldn't sit still anymore. "Look," he said to the room, "I've worn that uniform. My dad wore it too. You don't laugh at folded flags. You don't treat symbols like inconvenience. That's a father carrying his son's last breath in plastic." A few people murmured in agreement. One nodded with wide eyes. Ray sat back down, but something had shifted. Back in Bradley's neighborhood, support arrived in a different way. First, it was a note left at his door, scrawled in neat cursive on military letterhead. "You don't know me, but I lost my brother in Kandahar. Your quiet meant more than 1,000 speeches. Respectfully, Elector Marcus Trent, Rat." Then, a package. No return address, just a carefully folded American flag inside, accompanied by a handmade plaque that read, "For the son you carry every day, and the father we now carry forward." Bradley didn't cry easily. Vietnam didn't leave space for that. But when he held that second flag in his hands, a tremor ran through him that hadn't surfaced in years. He placed it beside Tommy's photo on the mantel. Nell showed up that afternoon with a pack of iced teas and a smirk on his face. "Someone organized a barbecue," he said, waving toward the street. "Veteran families. Couple Gold Star moms. They're bringing lawn chairs and crock pots. Called it the Flag You Don't Laugh At picnic." Bradley blinked. "That's not subtle." "Nope," Mel grinned. "But subtle didn't get Rosa on that bus either." By late afternoon, the street was filled with folding chairs, coolers, service dogs, kids playing tag, and flags of every shape and stripe. Some official, some hand-drawn by neighborhood children. Someone brought a sound system and played Johnny Cash and Lee Greenwood. The air didn't hum with anger. Garrett hummed with gratitude. Bradley sat beneath the shade of his porch awning, unsure what to say to the steady stream of people who came up to him. Some offered hugs. Others offered quiet nods. Most just said, "Thank you." A little boy in a camo ball cap stepped forward nervously and held out a drawing, Bradley and a folded flag, both colored with crayon and pride. "Issue?" the boy asked. Bradley smiled softly. "I suppose it is." The boy beamed and ran back to his dad, who saluted without a word. Yasmin arrived late, standing near the edge of the crowd, uncertain whether to interrupt the moment. Bradley caught her eye and nodded once. She came over, phone tucked away for once. "I didn't mean for it to become this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "It's just, it hit me what she said, how she said it." "She said it loud enough for the country to hear," Bradley replied. "That's not your fault." There was a long silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Jasmine said, "They reopened the branch. New staff. There's a statement going around. They're renaming a community outreach program in Tommy's honor. I thought you should know." Bradley blinked. "Tommy? They're calling it McAllister Honor Fund. Goes live next week. Scholarships for children of veterans, grants for military families." Bradley stared into the distance, eyes unfocused. Then he nodded, once. "The flag in my wallet," he began, then paused. "It's not just about remembering who he was. It's about reminding people who he still is." Jasmine swallowed hard. "He still is." The two stood in silence again, the laughter of kids and the low thrum of music behind them. When Bradley finally spoke again, it wasn't to Jasmine, it was more to himself. Hometail laughed, but a nation stood up, and the way he said it, like fact, not pride, told Jasmine everything she needed to know. Bradley McAllister hadn't become a hero that week. He'd always been one. The world had just remembered how to notice. 3 weeks after the video went viral, Bradley stood in the exact same spot he had during the incident, right in front of the teller window, but the bank wasn't the same, and neither was he. Red Oak National had repainted the lobby. The sterile white walls had been replaced by warm, earth-toned hues. Framed prints of veterans in uniform from World War II to present day now hung near the entrance. A display table had been installed across from the teller booths, showcasing the folded flag, a photo of Tommy in uniform, and a small bronze plaque that read, "In honor of CPL Thomas E. McAllister and the millions who serve in silence." Bradley hadn't wanted a ceremony. He'd told them, "I'm not a ribbon guy." But they insisted, and, deep down, he'd come to understand something important. This wasn't about fanfare. It was about fixing something that had been broken, not just by one woman's mockery, but by years of cultural amnesia. The new branch manager, a Navy vet named Alan Reyes, stood beside him as a line of local students filed in to see the new Veterans Memorial Wall. They were quiet, respectful. One girl, maybe 13, traced the edge of Tommy's name with her finger and whispered to her friend, "That's the guy whose dad got laughed at, but now they teach about him." Bradley heard it, and for once it didn't bring pain. It brought peace. A camera crew from a local news station approached, and Alan nodded for Bradley's approval. He didn't love it, but he nodded back. He had learned, sometimes the story needs a voice, especially for those who don't have one anymore. The reporter was young, polite, and not too pushy. "Mr. McAllister, thank you for being here today. Can you tell us what this moment means to you?" Bradley looked at the camera for a long time, not at the lens but through it, like it was just another window. "I'm here because I didn't ask to be," he said plainly. "I wasn't trying to make a point. I was just withdrawing money. What happened that day, well, it happened. But what came after? That's what matters. This isn't about me, it's about what we choose to respect." The reporter smiled softly. "And what would you say to those watching?" Bradley thought about that, really thought. Then he said, "Ask yourself what you'd do if that flag belonged to someone you loved. Because for a lot of us, it does." The segment aired that night during the evening news. The station called it Restoring Honor. It went regional, then national again. But Bradley didn't watch it. Instead, he sat out back with Mel, drinking cold lemonade under the old sycamore, a radio humming old country tunes in the background. "You handled that like a damn statesman," Mel said with a chuckle. Bradley shrugged. "Guess all those years of being ignored trained me for it." "Or maybe," Mel said, looking at him over the rim of his glass, "you just figure out something most people never do, that respect ain't something you scream about. It's something you carry." Bradley gave a quiet nod. That weekend, the local American Legion post invited him to be their guest of honor. He tried to decline. They insisted. When he arrived, he was stunned to find over 100 people gathered in the hall. Veterans, spouses, children, community members. A massive banner hung above the stage. to the one who carried the flag, so we could carry on. Bradley was given the Legion's Community Valor Award, something typically reserved for lifetime volunteers or major donors. He hadn't expected that. He didn't even prepare a speech, but when they handed him the plaque, he looked out over the crowd, took a breath, and spoke from the center of his chest. I've seen what war does to men. I've seen what loss does to fathers, but I've also seen what community can do to wounds. This flag here, he lifted his wallet from his pocket, holding it gently, isn't just folded fabric. It's weight. It's memory. It's love. And today, I don't feel like I'm carrying it alone anymore. The room erupted in applause, not because of the speech, but because of the truth inside it. Jasmine was there too, standing in the back with tears in her eyes and her phone down by her side. For once, not recording. After the ceremony, she came up to him and smiled. "They're asking if you'll do a veterans podcast." Bradley chuckled. "What's a podcast?" "Basically just you talking," she grinned. "Only now people listen." He considered that, then tilted his head. "Maybe one day." "Not today." "Today," he said, patting the folded flag card, "I just want to sit a while and remember my boy." The two of them walked out into the warm twilight, the stars beginning to prick at the edges of the sky. Weeks turned to months. Red Oak National implemented a new initiative called the Veteran Recognition Protocol, developed in part by Alan Reyes and other former service members. Every employee underwent training. Every branch had a veterans display. And every teller station now included a sign that read, "Veterans served here with honor. Thank you for yours." More importantly, conversations started to change. At grocery stores, at gas stations, on campuses, people began asking questions, listening to stories, learning the names behind the uniforms. One by one, folded flags across the country came out of drawers and closets and were seen, not as relics, but as living testaments. As for Rachel Carrington, she resigned quietly. No press release, no interviews. But Jasmine later heard she'd taken a job at a non-profit for veterans with PTSD. Redemption, it seemed, had found its way even into places that once held ridicule. And Bradley, he kept living like he always had. Slow mornings, careful steps, a hand on the flag every time he pulled his wallet from his pocket. But he wasn't invisible anymore. Neighbors waved. Kids called out to him by name. He was invited to schools to speak, though he rarely said much, just told them Tommy liked maps, that he drew treasure trails no one else could find. One teacher later told him, "Your son found a treasure after all. He found a nation that remembered." On the first anniversary of the bank incident, Bradley stood in front of that same teller window once more. This time it was a ceremony. Alan Reyes stood beside him again. "You ready?" Bradley looked at the crowd. Familiar faces. Press again. Jasmine with her camera up, but smiling through tears. "I suppose I am?" He stepped forward and placed his folded flag card inside a glass display near the counter. Not his only copy, but the original. "For safekeeping," he said. "For remembering." He stepped back, saluted softly, and whispered beneath his breath, "That's what honor looks like." And this time, no one laughed. They stood, and they clapped.